So, hi and welcome to the Firefly Adda, your virtual conversation starter, a platform where we create thought leadership content which is insightful and has some great takeaways. Today's episode, we will be talking about one of the most important functions in a corporate setup, the human resources function. And the conversation will primarily revolve around how this function is actually helping the employees and safeguarding them during these challenging times. To talk about this, we have a very special guest today, and his name is Mr. Vasudevan Parthasarathy. He's a senior talent acquisition leader in the HR industry. Hi, and welcome, Vasudevan, to the Firefly Adda.
Hey, hi Kushagra. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's such a pleasure, Vasudevan. Can I actually call you Vasu? Is that okay?
Yes, Vasu absolutely works. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vasu, for taking some time out. It's a very intriguing topic that we're actually going to touch upon. These are very challenging times, and a lot of us are sort of locked down, trying to understand what businesses are actually trying to do and what they actually foresee. And HR department as a whole actually has a very pivotal role in the whole journey of how companies are going to sort of organize their workforce, rally the troops and get things moving, so that there is no dropping the ball in the game of running the business. So I'm sure you would agree to that point. Is that right?
Absolutely. Top
so
priority.
firstly, Vasu, we want to actually talk about how HR as a department is actually facing this crisis. I think this is one of the top priorities for each of the HR personnel in different businesses. So how is HR actually prioritizing this, and how are they sort of embracing these challenging times and helping organizations and employees out?
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question and very valid in the current scheme of things. And given the fact that we are, going through unprecedented times, specifically with something which is unknown to everyone, and I think so. It's absolutely kind of given a different approach in terms of how HR as an organization or HR leaders do look at the current situation, and specifically this revolving employees, because employees are the foundation blocks of any organization, and it's for any organization, it's employee health and safety comes as number one priority, right? And given the fact that we are responsible for delivering the business, ensuring that there is no disruption to our day-to-day activity. So the way that we have any HR function or any HR in the organization has kind of looked into is for foremost looking at the employee health and safety, whether the employees are able to kind of commute to the office, and what are the checks and balances that one needs to be taken specifically in this situation, because the country is on a lockdown. We are not able to kind of commute, we are not able to kind of see people in person. The way that industries, and this is absolutely an eye opener for many of the companies, that the way that industries have kind of really, I would say, adapted to this change, right? And if I kind of go back to some of the readings that I've done over the last couple of weeks, the statistics says it's been possibly the first time in the industry that such a magnanimity or scale of uh, situation which has happened, specifically around people having to think beyond, organizations having to kind of think completely differently when there was the situation where companies were averse to people working from home. They would want to kind of see their employees in office, and typically some of the companies which are customer centric, right? When I say customer centric, where they have their offshore development setups, etc., where the contractual obligations require your team and the team to kind of work at the office and in offshore development. I mean, the things have actually taken a absolute shift in terms of the way organizations are kind of adapting to this change, and I think so we have quickly done that. With regards to how HR has enabled, it's more in terms of collaboration with our business stakeholders, collaboration with our employee workforce, collaboration with our facilities, our employee health and safety departments, because at the end of the day we need to kind of keep the engine running, and we cannot go about having the ball getting dropped at any point of time. So it's a fabulous I would say recipe of all these departments coming together, and how we have demonstrated our ability in the last, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks of we kind of standing very strongly, I would say, in terms of meeting our business commitments.
Absolutely, Vasu. It's more like a war cry, rallying the troops together,
Yeah.
collaborating with different departments, and
Mm.
coming and making things possible. So maybe you did touch upon this, as in your first sort of answer to my question. But what role does communication, remote working and reporting, what really are all these ingredients? How are they actually sort of amalgamating really well together, and how is the HR department really looking at this piece, the communication, remote workforce, and reporting? So this becomes very vital, right? So how is the HR department really looking at this?
Right. So I strongly believe that the current situation has made people to kind of think differently, given the fact that we had the entire workforce, almost about 90 to 95% of workforce at any given point of time physically working in the office, and here we are, almost 100% of the employee staff working from home. So that kind of gives uh, additional, I would say, weightage in terms of having to how we keep the communication channels, going very frequently. It's important because we are all working in virtual environment, connected through internet, connected through telephony. So it's important how we keep feeding in that messages. In fact, I would say over communication is the key at this point of time, and I'm sure that every organization has their own standards in terms of reaching out to their employees, checking on their welfare, on their safety. More so, I think so. It's more to do with empowerment and trust, right? Because there's a lot of I would say gray area in terms of what's going to happen if the person is working from home, right? And
Mhm.
is he or she able to kind of go about demonstrating his, or rather I would say delivering 100% productivity as possibly that he or she used to do while he was at workplace, right? I think so. There's a shift that has happened, in terms of empowerment, in terms of trust, in terms of confidence, in terms of, I think so, measuring people in terms of, while productivity is important, output deliverables are important. But having said that, it's the new way of life, right? And when I say empowerment, you've got leaders of their specific groups, departments. So you have those frequent, interval calls, team meetings, huddles, which would happen on a very virtual environment. I'm sure we all are, using Zoom or Google videos or any of those video platform interfaces to go about connecting. And as you can see, LinkedIn has been pretty active nowadays in terms
Mhm.
of people posting, screenshots of
Mhm.
their screens where the entire team comes into huddle. So I think so. It's very interesting, how people shift and adapt to the new way of life. So to be fair, I think so. It's been a fabulous journey over the last 6 to 8 months, given the shift in terms of mindset, given the shift in terms of how people think, given the shift in terms of how HR also has been able to kind of come to the reality that this is something which can be done at any given point of time. And I can absolutely quote, which was there in the print media, and one of the top IT services company, TCS, so CEO coming and saying our business model goes back to almost 20 years, and now they're talking about their entire workforce having to kind of work from home in the near future. So I mean, this itself is a clear indication in terms of things can go, absolutely normal, and every department, including HR, I think so. We will have to go about aligning to the new working, style that everyone is forced to adapt in the current situation.
Great. So, Vasu, I have a couple of slides to sort of share and talk about the most pressing sort of challenges that the HRs may be facing. So, I just wanted your validation on whether we are actually talking about the right sort of challenges. So, I'll just quickly
Okay.
share my screen. So, can you see this?
Yeah, it's a little bit smaller, but I can try to
Is
kind
it
of
better now?
yeah, yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
So I picked this up from one of the researches that one of the individuals named Josh Burson has actually done, and it looked very interesting to me. So I just wanted maybe a quick perspective from your side, on whether this analysis, holds good from your perspective. So if you want me to read out, the
No, no, I
top,
can.
yeah,
It's pretty
mhm,
visible now.
yeah,
So I already touched upon the first bar graph, right, which speaks
yeah.
about the health of employees. So employee health and safety, I think so. That's key critical element for any organization. So I believe every organization in these unprecedented times have actually gone beyond their line of duty and ensured that employees are safe and healthy, and obviously there's been a lot of reporting which happens out of it. Transition to remote work, I briefly touched upon this during my conversation earlier. Uh, I believe it's more to do with while it's not an easy shift given the parameters around security, because security plays a very key critical elements with all these cyber attacks, etc. So a lot of companies had their apprehensions, and that's where a lot of companies have your BCP plans kind of getting invoked in an unprecedented times even earlier, right? So I think so. This episode has actually kind of made companies to think absolutely differently, and the transition to working remotely. There were definitely teething issues. I would not say it's a very straightforward approach, because your connectivity issues which would come up, people having to kind of log into your VPN firewall, because your servers are only used to kind of taking X amount of a load onto them. So obviously there were initial issues. So I would say kudos to the IT department in each of the organizations. They have done a commendable job in terms of trying to kind of fix these things. Look at in terms of how we can increase the load on the VPN, etc. So and of course, keeping in mind the most important element, which is around security of the applications that are kind of being used, right? Especially in a remote working environment. Let me possibly pick up another, communicate frequently, clearly. We already kind of touched about it. Continuity of business operations. So I think so. I come from a business where a lot of activities do have either month end or quarter end kind of closures, right? And specifically, I would say more to do with either your more to do with finance activities, where a lot of things need to kind of get recorded or get kind of published internally to a closure on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And these are some of the things which do kind of the communication can kind of break down. Data might not kind of coming in get treated appropriately if things are not going in the right direction. I would say, most of the companies, I would say they have done exceptionally well. At least I can speak for the organization that I represent, and I keep getting that information from our leaders, right? That the year end the month end activities went well. The quarter end activities, we closed the books without having any single flaw in terms of the entire set of activities, etc. So I think so. It's been a great shift, I would say. um, what else? Plan workforce utilization. I mean, do you want me to kind of
I
venture
think
into each
an
of the
important
things?
one, which is just at 7%, which is surprising, is help employees and mental health. So I think this is going to be a paramount aspect that HR as a department needs to look at closely, because lockdowns, you never know, this could actually be an extended sort of a period, right? So people and employees staying at home, how do HRs rally together and understand how they can sort of look at the employees' mental health and well-being.
Yeah, so a couple of things, at least what I've been, either reading as well as seeing some of the videos, right? Some of these innovative approaches that organizations have come in, and of course HR has been instrumental in kind of driving some of these key changes. I mean, for example, you take the example of we having to physically be in an office where we either do kind of team huddle, or do some activities which is more to kind of bring down your your mundane activities which happens at the workplace, like your anything that would kind of ease down your stress level, or possibly some fun activities, etc. Now this was something which was physically being done in the office, and that entire platform has actually shifted into a virtual environment. And I would say the respective people managers also play a extensive critical role, right, apart from HR. So it's a very thought out approach in terms of how we can get our keep our teams engaged in addition to the kind of work. And believe me, I don't mind shying away from making a statement that in the currency scheme of things, working from home, people have actually landed up working more number of hours, and that's but natural. So given that as the I would say addition, add on to the question that you have kind of put out here, or the the 7% uh, statistics which speaks about it, it makes life much more important for uh, people managers as well as HR leaders to kind of come together, think differently, keep the team pepped up, right? It's important. And so what we are doing is fun activities that typically used to happen in the office in a very virtual environment, have social gatherings in a very virtual environment, have some quiz competitions, or possibly I would say antaksharis. I mean, I've seen some of them which is more on the fun element side of it. I think so. These are some of the elements which happen, and most importantly, Kushagra, this is a great time for employees to kind of have a much more bonding activity with the family, right? And this is the time where we have everyone locked down. Your partner, your parents, your children, right? And children's where schools are shut down, where their exams either, at least for some of the grades, till about I think so 8 or 9, they've automatically been promoted to the next grade, right? And here we are. So everybody are in the house. How do you kind of make yourself engaged? So it's a great opportunity for employees to go about spending more time with your kids, getting to know the brighter side of the children. Some of the areas that we have been kind of encouraging as HR professionals is challenge your children to kind of go about doing something more creative, get involved in those activities. I mean, you become a child, right? I mean, that's where you actually start thinking differently, look at different perspectives, and you never know some of the things that you would have done during your childhood and kind of forgotten. You would possibly would want to kind of go about experimenting. So these are some of the things which actually go about playing on the mind of the individual, and it kind of keeps those positive vibes going. Kushagra, I mean, that's what I would say.
Fantastic, Vasu. So there are some great tips out there. So I'll just move on to another interesting slide and maybe get a perspective from you from the maybe the employee standpoint. So what are the top issues from an employee standpoint? So do you look at this a little closely and come up with your sort of analysis around that?
So I'm part of a talent acquisition leaders group, and these are some of the questions that did kind of come through as well in our discussion forums, right? And job security obviously is top priority, right? And specifically, again, I would not want to kind of generalize any specific industry segment out here, but yes, this is one of the areas, given the fact that there is huge pressure on cost, because everything is related to cost, everything is related to how the business gets impacted, right? And but having said that, I think so as a government here, and at the same time organizations have ensured that they do all possible things to go about keeping keeping this particular question being addressed on top priority. I mean, reason being, I mean, these are unprecedented times. These are times which are which everybody knows that it's going to be there for a shorter period of time, and we will have to kind of tide through the situation. So organizations also are kind of very committed in terms of having to ensure that we would not go about laying off people. We would not go about um, retrenching people or possibly not paying salaries, etc. Some companies would possibly practice that. I mean, that's individual discretion, but we cannot go about generalizing the entire industry or the entire ecosystem, right? And if you see some of the economic measures that the government has taken, and just not keeping in mind any specific industry overall, I think so. The government has done exceptionally well. I mean, kudos to the leadership, to the administration, and which is also kind of trickled down to the respective states, and states in turn providing those needed directions and measures to the organizations out here in their respective states and cities. So, I mean, coming back to your question, organizations are very much committed to ensure that we would not go about having any impact to our employee workforce. And I mean, they are doing all possible things that is required to ensure that we do not go about painting a wrong picture, right? So that's on job security. Uh, Remote work, I think so. We already kind of spoke about stress and mental health. I think so. We already spoke about personal health. I think so. It's again it's a mix of multiple things that I kind of touched upon, right? I mean, again, it's how you keep the employee engaged, how you keep the employee workforce occupied, how you go about keeping keep the environment more vibrant, more social. Have your team meetings, team huddles, or go about communications, over communicate. So I think so. These are some of the things which are already kind of playing around. So I do not see that personal health. I'm surprised to see a statistics number of 38%, but I think so that organizations are doing exceptionally well to ensure we take care of this particular aspect as well. Any other point that you would want me to kind of comment?
So yeah, surprisingly productivity at 7%. So how does the HR fraternity look at that? I mean, because that's not something that should be the case. I mean, even though it's a given that you work from home, but you need to be productive as well, because it'll directly impact the business. So what are your thoughts around that?
I am so when you say 7%, if you can possibly define as to what this particular industry trends, do they say that 7% is something which the employee thinks it is there in their mind that productivity might drop, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around, if I understand this better. So I think productivity is not something on top of the mind, is what my understanding is with this research.
So, I mean, to be fair to this statistics and the trend analysis and the whatever background work that has gone in. So, as a industry segment, we have evolved. I mean, I would not want to call out any specific industry, and if I would want to kind of give some specific comparisons, right? Because it's very easy for us to go about determining. Let's take IT or software as an industry, right? Where most of the things are either using internet or your phone or your gadgets, and you being connected through your VPN systems, etc. Think about the industries which have actually do not have the ability to go about actually being connected. And I represent one of that industry, and we have been exceptionally uh, I would say the way that we have managed, and it's all about what's your commitment level. It's all about how are you committed to your customer. At the end of the day, it's all about how we go about meeting our customers' requirements. It's all about how do we go about going that extra mile and giving that 100% output to our customers. Even during this unprecedented times, right? So So the element of going back to my earlier point, which I'd mentioned, the element of trust factor needs is becoming much more stronger. You are measuring your productivity more in terms of your output and deliverables, rather your number of working hours that you actually represent, right? I mean, gone are the days that that people used to measures people's productivity basis number of hours that you kind of clock in. I mean, you might be working in an environment which would expect you to work for 16 hours, or rather show up yourself for 16 hours, but your actual productivity didn't have to be that. So having said that, I think so, people can be productive 100% or even beyond, even if you go about working for about 4 hours. So it's all about how you look at that entire pyramid of spectrum, how you go about having that trust element on your employees, and how you go about making them accountable and deliverables, right? Accountable on their deliverables. So I think so industry has come a long way, and industry is kind of accepting to kind of those terms.
Fantastic thoughts, Vasu. So, just one more slide to spice things up a little bit when it comes to maybe what are companies doing differently. So, I may just want to, get your perspective around this. You did speak about, engagements,
Yeah.
virtual sort of meetups, and so on and so forth. So, any out of the box, ideas that you have in mind which you would want to maybe convey to the rest of the community to, sort of embrace and pick up. So, these are a few of the things which sort of popped up during the research that was conducted, but anything any different from your thought process?
I'm just taking a just kind of pause here for a couple of seconds just to kind of go through the areas which have been covered, right? So yeah, I think so. Rather than me having to touch upon this, and if at all it has been covered, and I might have kind of been an oversight, I would want to kind of give some insights more in terms of the future state, because India as a country and most of other countries are also kind of looking at in terms of relaxing the lockdown. So I would want to kind of speak on what are the kind of thought process that companies should look at adapting, or possibly could have in mind when they look at in terms of resuming services. Of course, we would not be kind of doing it lock, stock, and barrel at one go. It's going to be definitely a phased approach, because the virus and the social distancing aspect in a country of 1.3 billion population and beyond is something which can kind of come up right again. So I would say companies are thinking on in lines of, and this is a very generic thing, and I'm sure that people who would possibly get to hear me out would also agree to me that companies are looking at having a population of about 20% to kind of start with, most critical services that needs to kind of come into the office, which are absolute non-negotiable. Then you look at in terms of a staggered approach, setting your office space, cubicles, ensuring that there is a bare minimum social distancing, across two colleagues sitting with next to each other. Third thing being, most importantly, is that segmenting your population into possibly team A and team B, wherein team A works into office one week and team B comes into the office next week. So that way, even if there's a need for people to kind of come into the office, they are not kind of coming into the office 100%. You're having a very staggered approach. Of course, looking at in terms of keeping in mind the employee health and safety. So, I mean, these are some of the norms that we will continue to kind of exercise. This is going to be, a very big game changer for everyone, every individual, every human being. That in terms of the hygiene aspect that we will have to kind of go about practicing. This is kind of given I would say it's a shock. It's like a shock treatment that everyone has kind of received in terms of how we need to go about practicing. And I mean, these are all things that we were all kind of coached, educated when we were children, and people are now are forced to kind of practice it, right? I mean, some of those aspects around social distancing, keeping your surroundings clean, wash your hands. I mean, there's so many advertisements coming around, how to go about washing your hands, using sanitizers, soap solutions. I mean, these are all things that we all know, but why is it kind of being spoken about now? So I think so. These are things which will continue even at the workplace, uh, and of course, most importantly, uh, ensure that you keep your masks on. Especially while you're in a meeting together, in a meeting room together, it's important that we keep our masks on. I mean, these are all basic stuffs, Kushagra, that everyone, I'm sure, will be kind of, I would say, just not forced to follow, but it will become part of their DNA as we kind of move forward.
Absolutely, Vasu. So, on that note, I'll just quickly stop sharing. I may have a couple of more questions and then we can quickly wind up.
Sure.
So, moving ahead, Vasu, a very, very relevant question, during these times, automation, AI coming to the fore. So how is the HR fraternity looking at this closely? So I actually read a article about ITC, which has about 9,000 odd employees, deploying something called as digital buddies for each employee, and they spoke about the HR function very specifically as a use case where any transactional sort of program which an HR is running, for example, maybe approaching a candidate to get their documents, would be conducted by this digital persona or this digital so-called digital buddy. So what are your thoughts around automation and AI coming to the fore, and how is the HR community looking at it a little closely?
So I would answer this question in two parts. Part number one is, you know, technology interface has always been in existence, and large companies who are advanced in terms of their technology investments in space have already gone about implementing this, right? I mean, I would say, as if I kind of go back, these kind of platforms were very well being utilized, I would say, almost about 4 to 5 years ago, where we had technology interface platforms. I mean, though it did not have a name defined against it, but all these technology jargons like artificial intelligence, machine learning, which have kind of come up over the last couple of years, are already there behind the scenes. So it just kind of uh, you know got renamed in a big way, and people started kind of knowing it in a much more broader spectrum, right? So we are talking about digital space, at least for the last about 8 to 10 years now. And if I talk about HR as a function, right? So many companies have started using, I would say, platforms which would help candidates. Since you are touched upon the candidates in terms of the paperwork, documentation, etc., they are using these platforms to go about having candidates to go about scanning their paperwork and putting into into that particular cloud-based database, right? So it's all there. I mean, it's just that some of the companies are possibly much ahead of the curve. Some companies are kind of lagging behind, and I would say there is a lot of transformation journey that HR is kind of going through over the last couple of years, and will kind of continue to kind of go through as we evolve as an organization, right? And everything depends on investments, your appetite, and how would you want to kind of go about making your day-to-day operational activities much more streamlined, much more effective. Do not have people interference as part of the process, and it's all there. I mean, let me kind of take an example. You've got chatbots right now that companies are using. I mean, there's a lot of letters, or for that matter, documents that employees keep approaching HR departments for. I mean, the concept of chatbots have kind of come into the picture, at least I would say, a couple of years ago, where whenever you log into your intranet, which is designated for your organization, a message pops up saying that, hi Kushagra, how can I help you? Because it recognizes who you're logging, because your login credentials is available behind the scenes. So it recognizes who you are, and starts greeting you in terms of, how can I help you? What do you want? Then you have your standard set of questions that the chatbot kind of, is prompted to kind of keep asking, right? So it's all there, and HR organizations or HR functions have been kind of, using this extensively, and that's where, you will go about uh, taking away your day-to-day mundane activities which are more transactional, and look at in terms of how you can go about focusing that time or devoting that time towards more strategic in nature. And that's the direction all the organizations are kind of either have headed or are heading. And I would say a lot of companies are investing in terms of their HR transformation journey moving forward as well.
Absolutely. So I echo your statements, Vasu here. So a few more questions. One more critical one, especially for the freshers community, or interns who are sort of stuck in a limbo right now. So there might be situations where they might have gotten the offer letter in hand, but organizations don't necessarily know when to sort of onboard them and get them to function within the scheme of things. So what are your recommendations to sort of calm these so-called freshers and students sort of down, so that they get a little overcome their anxieties and sort of calm down? So what are your recommendations to them?
So I would say, I'm a strong advocate of, millennials, right? And any organization would want to kind of go about, honoring the commitment which they would have gone about, providing during their university hiring programs, etc. And most of the companies are kind of honoring to that, right? Uh, yes, there could be some delays in terms of onboarding these graduates who've been kind of offered. I think so. The best way to kind of go about managing this particular gap between the time that you are being offered and the time that your actual onboarding timeline comes into play, I would say, this is a fabulous time that you possibly would not go about getting, and not we would want to kind of experience this more on the negative side, right? That, equip yourself in terms of knowledge base. I think so. uh, which are the kind of companies which is kind of offered you, right? So do some study in terms of how your employer whom you're kind of joining in the coming months, what they are into, what kind of product lines that they do, what kind of services that they are into, what kind of service offerings that they do, you know how is their ecosystem, what are their I mean, if I would want to kind of talk about specifically technology, what are the kind of technology platforms that they go about using? How do they go about managing their customers? Read through testimonials. There is tons of information available in the social media platform, and I am only advising everyone here, guys. Please do not panic. As an organization, every organization is committed to go about getting you on board. At the end of the day, you are being chosen as the right candidate to as part of the journey, and every organization will go about honoring that. I mean, there could be certain delays due to internal business dynamics, but having said that, please be rest assured that it is a I would say a wave, unfortunate wave that we are kind of tiding at this point of time. It's going to die down very soon. You will be getting to hear the good news of your employer and the HR department having to kind of reach out to you. So stay positive. Get to kind of learn more. Invest on yourself. Invest on self learning. Invest on what to get to know more about the organization and the way that how you can go about contributing to the organization once you come on board. So these are some of the success mantras, I would say, Kushagra. I mean, most importantly, stay positive. I think so. The more you kind of be negative, the more you kind of think about, oh, what's going to happen to me? Will my offer kind of stand active? Would I get a job, etc.? That's only going to pull you down. So my sincere advice: stay calm, stay focused, stay positive, and I think so. It's just a matter of time that you're going to be called back. So stay positive.
Thanks for that, Vasu. So, just one final one. Any sort of thoughts to budding or aspiring HR professionals, who want to actually take their career path and journey towards being, an HR and growing in that function?
So, so it's a very broad question, Kushagra, because HR is so vast, right? And you really need to kind of get to the details if you have to actually experience each of that. But in general, if I would want to kind of make a comment out here, I know HR plays a very key critical element, irrespective of what sub function that you represent. This function and you as an individual do play a very, very key critical element, because you are the person between the management, between your employees, between your stakeholders, and more so ever, you're always are on the line of fire, right? And it is uh, I would not shy away from saying that it's a thankless job. But having said that, I think so. We are all here to go about, living up to our commitment level, living up to our expectation in terms of how we can go about making an impact. So for all those buddies who are wanting to kind of make HR as your profession, I think so. It's an ocean, right? It's an ocean of opportunities. You just need to ensure that you pick on the right wave and start kind of going surfboarding on that wave. But yes, it's a great platform, because you're connected to people, which is your core fundamental assets of any organization. So that's what I had to say.
Fantastic, Vasu. These were like great insights, great pearls of wisdom from an HR perspective, especially during these challenging times. I'd like to personally thank you for being a part of the Firefly Adda. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely, Kushagra. Thanks for having me on your show. It is indeed my pleasure to kind of share my 2 cents in terms of whatever questions that you had. I hope it was helpful for the people who would get to kind of hear me at a later point of time. And yes, look forward to many such interactions and sharing my insights.
Thank you so much, Vasu.
Thanks, Kushagra. Thanks for
Thank you.
having
Bye
having
bye.
me. Take care. Stay
Bye
safe. Bye
bye.
bye.
You too. Bye bye.